As you know, as the title indicates, this is a webinar to launch a new resource guide for WILPF about the Nuclear Weapon Ban Treaty and how we can continue to be an active force in advocating for the treaty in a new phase of work. So our agenda for today, just so you have a sense of what we want to cover, is I'm basically going to take you through our new resource guide. And in doing so, we're going to cover what is the current status of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, what is in the guide, and that's going to talk about the other contents of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, or TPNW for short. It's going to talk about WILPF's historic role in advocating for this treaty. We will give you ideas for taking action in the new phase, and also where you can find more information than what we were able to put into a single resource guide. And then lastly, I'd like to have some discussion and sharing at the end. I know that many of you on this webinar have been very active, an active part of the Women Ban the Bomb campaign last year, or in calling for the ban over the last several years. So it'd really be great to hear from you about what you've done in past and what you might have lined up for future. And of course, please feel free to share your experience on today's webinar. The two Twitter handles that you would want to look for are @WILPF and @RCW_. We're still using Women Ban the Bomb as a hashtag when it works. And of course, always the hashtag for talking about the TPNW is #NuclearBan. Maybe just a little bit of background as well. I think that most people on this webinar would know that Reaching Critical Will is the name of the disarmament program of WILPF, although sometimes external audiences think we might be our own organization. But note, we are the disarmament program of the bigger organization, created in 1999 to lead analysis and advocacy for disarmaments, reducing military spending, militarism, and investigating the gendered aspects of weapons and disarmament. And some of our key activities include research, policy analysis, advocacy, monitoring, and reporting. The voice here that you're hearing right now, it's me. My name is Allison Pitlack. I am the manager in Reaching Critical Will. You probably know my colleague Ray Atchison much better because she's been with the organization for so long. She's the director, I'm the manager. I've been with WILPF for about 1.5 years now, and prior to that have worked in disarmament and arms control for about 10 years. So very excited to be part of the team. It's been a great year being part of the ban treaty movement and also getting to know many of you. All right, so why did we create a guide? I guess I should also start by saying that this is, while we have a resource guide, which is the booklet, this is part of a broader toolkit that we're trying to make available for everybody. What that means is that right now, and what we're launching today, is the resource guide. It is like a small book, but we are also going to be producing infographics that you can use to print out and make signs at your events, that you can use to share on your websites or social media platforms. We wanted to kind of give everybody a few options and things to work with. But as of today, it's the guidebook that's ready in English, French, and Spanish. It will be uploaded to MyWILPF a bit later on after this webinar, and then become available by tomorrow on wilpf.org and reachingcriticalwill.org. Why did we do this? Well, WILPF, as you all know, has been a very vibrant and active part of the campaign for the TPNW for many, many, many years, and we don't want that to stop. But we're in a new phase of work that requires new knowledge, skills, and ideas. The treaty opened for signature after being adopted in July of 2017, and now the real emphasis is on getting national governments to sign or ratify the agreement. We need 50 ratifications for it to enter into force and become legally binding. And so this is sort of moving away from the UN conferences and the multilateral advocacy efforts and really turning inwards at the national level and working with national governments to see them agree and adopt the treaty, put in place new laws if they need to, and also build better public awareness and understanding about it. But first, we're going to do a little quiz. We wanted to ask everybody via a poll what you think the number of countries is that have signed the TPNW. There's two options. Please select the one that you think works. Okay, it looks like we've locked, 84% have voted. Poll closed. So 56, oh, poll's back open. No, okay, poll results. 56% of people, which is just over the majority, said 45 countries have signed the TPNW. 44% have said that it's 57 countries. The answer is 57. 57 states have signed the TPNW, but 5 countries have ratified it. And we'll get in a little bit later into what the difference between those things are. But for now, let's take a look inside the resource guide. So after a short introductory section, the guide, it really dives right into talking about what is the nuclear ban. So as I've already said, the full and proper name of the nuclear ban is the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. Feel free to use the acronym TPNW because it's a long name. But people are still calling it the Nuclear Ban Treaty, so it's very much okay to say that. And it is a landmark international agreement adopted at the UN on July 7th, 2017. And this new agreement fills a significant gap in international law. And I should also maybe say that what you're seeing on the PowerPoint right now is a screenshot from inside the guidebook. So this text, as well as other text, you'll have there inside the resource guide. But maybe because, just to refresh our memories, what does the treaty include? Well, at its core, the treaty is a prohibition treaty, and it makes it illegal to develop, test, produce, manufacture, transfer, possess, stockpile, use, or threaten to use nuclear weapons, or allow nuclear weapons to be stationed on the territory of a state's party. It also prohibits states parties from assisting, encouraging, or inducing anyone to engage in any of those activities. At the moment, there are no countries which possess nuclear weapons that had adopted the treaty or have signed it, but that doesn't mean that they're not welcome. And in fact, very much the goal is to get those nuclear armed countries on board with the TPNW. And if one of them wants to join the treaty in future, they would need to develop a legally binding, verified, and time-bound plan with the other states' parties to destroy its nuclear weapons and delivery systems. And this would also go for a country that hosts another country's nuclear weapons on its territories. It would have to have them removed by a specific deadline. So those provisions are sort of the things that states parties need to not do, the prohibited activities. But what's quite nice about the TPNW and different, I think, from a lot of other agreements is that it also includes positive obligations. And what I mean by positive obligations are things, excuse me, that states parties should do, not what they should not do, but what they should do. And in this case, they're obliged to provide assistance to victims of the use and testing of nuclear weapons and to take measures for the remediation of contaminated environments. This is very much a legacy from the treaty banning anti-personnel landmines and also the Convention on Cluster Munitions. Those agreements also have these sort of positive obligations around victim assistance, although neither one has anything in them about the environment. So that was really a very big step forward. But in addition to that legacy, the TPNW also complements the treaties that prohibit biological and chemical weapons and reinforce various other legal instruments on nuclear weapons, including the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, or NPT. The guidebook also has a little bit more information about the history of the advocacy that led up to the treaty, which involved really putting a human face back on the nuclear weapons debate and taking it out of just the domain of talking about security and stockpiles and numbers, and reminding people about the horrible, catastrophic humanitarian consequences. So the next bit of the guidebook looks more specifically at gender in nuclear weapons. And it's time for another poll in which we're going to ask everybody, do you think the TPNW is gender sensitive? Yes or no? All right, I think almost everyone has voted. Poll is closed. And 56% say yes, 44% say no, and I think that the yeses have it in this case because, oh no, I've gotten lost in my slides here. Okay. Because actually, yes, one of the most unique aspects of the TPNW is that it is the only gender-sensitive nuclear weapons agreement in existence. And this is because of the inclusion of gender dimensions in 2 places in the treaty. Both of them are in the preamble, which is sort of the introductory text that comes before the obligatory language in any treaty. First, in the preamble calls attention to the disproportionate impact of nuclear weapons on women and girls, including as a result of ionizing radiation. And second, also in the preamble, it addresses the importance of women's participation in nuclear disarmament. The exact text reads, recognizing that the equal, full, and effective participation of both women and men is an essential factor for the promotion and attainment of sustainable peace and security, and committed to supporting and strengthening the effective participation of women in nuclear disarmament. So this, of course, is the result of a lot of advocacy, a lot of attitude changing, a lot of bilateral discussions, a lot of making the case. And WILPF was really at the forefront of those efforts to try to bring the gendered aspects of weapons use and testing into the discussions on the TPNW. So that segues nicely into the next part of our guidebook that I want to just make sure that you're aware of, is talking about WILPF's historic role in the treaty process. And there has been a lot that we've done over the years, certainly. We've been a leading voice in the anti-nuclear community since the start of the atomic age. We've also been part of the steering group and a member of the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, known by its acronym ICAN, and which was the recipient of the 2017 Nobel Peace Prize. Ray and I are members of the steering group. Quite a lot of you engage with the campaign more broadly. And through this involvement with ICAN, we, the broader we have mobilized across the globe through advocacy, developing policy briefs, conducting research, monitoring discussions and negotiations, and speaking out on media and social media. WILPF was deeply involved in the advocacy with governments in the years leading up to the development of this treaty and during negotiations. We wrote some of the seminal briefing papers on this treaty, and you can find them. I've put the link towards the end of the resource guide if you want to read them for more information and more background. And we have also attended and provided monitoring and analysis on every banned treaty related meeting since the start of the humanitarian initiative. But moving beyond staff, I know that many of you have been very active as well, campaigning in national capacities, in a regional capacity. And so in a little while, when I'm finished introducing the guide, I would really encourage those of you who are on the webinar and have been active on the ban over the last several years to share your experiences in the past, but also your ideas and plans for the next phase. And then last, but absolutely not least, is the Take Action section of our guide. And this is really where we put forward some ideas and things that you might want to think about for this next phase of work. As I said before, now that the TPNW has been adopted and open for signature, we really need states to sign and ratify it as quickly as possible. It'd be great if we could reach the 50 ratifications within 2 years. Once we have 50 ratifications, it triggers the entry into force, and then it becomes a legally binding instrument. But what I want to say is that before getting started on any new actions or activities, it's very, very important to take a step back and think about the context in which you're working. So some countries adopted the treaty in July, which signals their general support for it, but they have yet to sign or ratify it. And others have signed it and now are completing the domestic process of ratification, which usually involves approval from a legislative body like a Congress or a parliament. And then there are other countries who boycotted the negotiations and continue to vocally oppose the treaty. So before embarking on any kind of work or actions or activities, take a step back, think about the position of your country. If you're not sure what that is, ICANN maintains a super helpful webpage with a list of countries that have signed and ratified, and also information about national positions on their website. The link for that is included in the resource guide as well. So some of the suggested activities that we've put forward to engage first with legislators. These people are going to be very instrumental in ensuring domestic support for signature ratification, but many have probably not heard of the TPNW before. As you remember, throughout the negotiations, we were working largely with diplomats, ones who were posted to Geneva or to New York, maybe with their legal advisors or military advisors, but not always everybody in the domestic audience was made aware of the treaty. And so now that the ratification legislation is being put forward, some of them are seeing this and hearing about the treaty for the very first time, and quite naturally are asking questions about what it is, what it means for national law, etc. So a great activity that can be done is to really work with them, whether it's through roundtables or other educational events, writing letters. You might want to develop resources that compare existing national law to any new obligations that the treaty might bring in. For example, many countries that are part of nuclear weapon free zone treaties are probably already really in compliance with the TPNW and wouldn't have to change anything. And knowing that could definitely expedite the ratification process. And then another area of work which helps, of course, as we all know, to put pressure on government leaders and also on legislators is public education. Support for eliminating nuclear weapons really starts at the community level, particularly as many people do not realize how real the threat of a nuclear war is and the significance of the ban. WILPF is uniquely placed to consistently remind the public about the impact of nuclear violence on women and about women's leadership in calling for disarmament. So along these lines, think about organizing seminars, lectures, or other educational events. Share the infographics that we will be providing or existing ones on your website or social media platforms. Talk to media, publish op-eds or news articles, or if you really want to do something a little more radical, organize a public action or a public stunt that will definitely get attention of people walking by. I also want to remind everyone that ICANN has 400 plus partner organizations, some of whom are likely active in your country. So if you're thinking about doing something but feeling like maybe it's too much work to go it alone, reach out and see what they've already got planned and work together. And then lastly, don't forget to connect with us. Ray and I are here. We're happy to be a resource to anyone who wants to know more about the ban, who wants to get more involved. We're happy to talk with you, answer your questions. If you do organize an action or activity, please send us pictures, send us information. We do a monthly e-news bulletin and are always looking for new material to include in it. So it'd be really, really great to hear from you. And then the last part of the guide, just to let you know that it's there is a section with key arguments, facts, and talking points that we hope will be helpful. And then towards the end of it, there's also a page with further information. And this is a list of websites and reading materials that you may want to consult with for your knowledge and for your plans. So I think you're probably tired of hearing my voice by now. So I'm going to open this up for questions, discussions. I also, I'm not sure if anybody on the webinar right now has been involved before in ban activities and would want to share. I know, Janet, we had spoken a little bit about you sharing a few things if you're on. Also, Gabriella, if you're here, it'd be great to hear from you. So opening up the floor.
So I have two hands. I will bring in Helena from Switzerland. Helena, you are muted.
Thank you for this wonderful introduction and explanation of the new WILPF guide, and hello from Switzerland. This is Helena IB from the Swiss section. We just, because I have to go a little bit early, I share my experience. We wrote to the Swiss delegation directly in New York during the negotiation, and we were in contact with the Swiss embassy in New York, and they actually reacted and responded very positively to our endeavors, that we would like to have it gender sensitive and also that they should sign. But my question is, it's okay, we have now 57 countries, but only 5 signatures, and we know that all the nuclear possessing countries have either boycotted or not signed or were reluctant, especially also important countries in the EU like Germany. They were afraid, of course, because of their trade relations. So what can we actually do to really convince the big countries and those that own, possess, and still proliferate nuclear weapons to get them on board? Thank you.
Thank you, Helena. I will bring in another question as well. This time is from Helen. Helen, you are unmuted.
Okay, this isn't a question, it's just a comment about what we're doing. I'm with the Golden Rule Peace Boat, and we're specifically educating people about the nuclear weapons ban as we sail our boat. Starting, well, in June, we sail from California to Hawaii, and then continue all around the Pacific, gathering information and educating people about the nuclear weapons ban. So just wanted you to know we're out there.
Great, thank you. I also have another hand up. It's from Joanne. Joanne, you're unmuted.
Hello. We always have to ask, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well, thank you.
Great. Okay. Wonderful so glad that the Golden Rule is on the call. Yay. I'm part of the WILPF San Jose, California branch, and we are in the San Francisco Bay Area. And what we do, we have been anticipating and we are planning to build an education project about the treaty by working with Jackie Cabasso, who is the leader in the US, especially of the, I'm overcome with this call here, so I'm you know, my mind goes blank now and then. Silly. Of Mayors for Peace. And some of the cities in the San Francisco Bay Area are already members of Mayors for Peace, but there are many cities and towns that are not. and so including our San Jose, California city. So we will be working with others all around the Bay Area, and probably including Santa Cruz, which is technically not part of the San Francisco Bay Area, but very close and already part of Mayors for Peace, to develop materials and methods to encourage our cities to join Mayors for Peace, while we also talk, because we're doing that, talk about the nuclear ban treaty, the nuclear weapons ban treaty. So we thank you very much for this guide, which will help a lot to educate people in our group, in our peace groups. We have several WILPF branches, WILPF United States branches in the Bay Area, and some of their cities are already members, but many are not. Many cities that are part of particular branch, WILPF branch areas are not part of the Mayors for Peace yet. So we think this will give them something to do as a city, and also to learn about the treaty, so that we're not just, in our case, talking about the treaty when so many people are so hopeless, but we want to get the education going, and this will be a big help, the guide. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. Alison, I have 2 more hands up. Would you like to comment, or should I continue with the audience?
I can respond, because I think I forget who it was, but the first person who spoke, I think she said that she had to get going, so I don't want to lose her. But just to say quickly that it's really great to hear that there are already plans to use the guide, and that you think there's going to be utility and use for it in what you've got organized already. I know Jackie Cabasso very well. I know Mayors for Peace very well, and of course Peace Boat too. So very happy to hear about your plans and activities, and that you can make use of what we've published. But yes, that $1 million question: how do we get the really big nuclear armed states on board the treaty? I think that's what everybody would like to know. Certainly, just I guess kind of 2 comments to that. I think first, we shouldn't also discount the very vital and important role that smaller or developing countries have played in this treaty process. And I think that some people have found the rate of signature or ratification to be a little bit slow. I've worked on a few other treaties before this one, and have always found that this first little while, right after you get all the signatures and it opens for signature, that things kind of quiet down, but then they pick up again. And the reason for this is really just usually owing to the rate, the pace at which things get ratified domestically, when you have parliaments in session, when they're sitting. Sometimes it's only a couple times a year. They have other priorities, other bills that they need to think through first. So I'm optimistic that we're going to see over the next couple of months more ratifications start to come in from some of the countries that have signed the treaty already, and we'll get that number 5 up a lot higher. But yes, how do we get the big countries on board? That would of course be a game changer for this. I think that we really need to keep up with the education. I think that putting public pressure on our governments is one very powerful tool that we have. I think nuclear weapons for a long time were an issue that many people felt were over, that they didn't care about, that they didn't need to worry about in their day-to-day lives. All you need to do is look at the news headlines over the last 6 months and see that the threat of nuclear weapons is more real than ever. But we're not communicating that to our representatives, to our government, and telling them that we're afraid, that we're concerned, that we don't want to have this in our lives. So I think that public education and public mobilization is really the way to go, and put pressure from the bottom up at the top, and get them to shift their policies and their positions. And I'm not saying that's going to be easy, because it definitely won't be. We would have already seen them come on board. But as long as we can be a loud and consistent voice in calling for that, it's going to be something that they can't ignore and they can't overlook. And maybe just also one thing to add to that is where we have seen a lot of good success so far is we're starting to see some major banks and financial institutions starting to divest from nuclear weapons producing companies, which isn't necessarily the same thing as getting a national government to sign on and agree to get rid of all of their nuclear weapons, but it is a very interesting and possibly even more effective way of addressing the problem is going at the source, going at the production, and going at where the money is. There's an excellent report that comes out every year called Don't Bank on the Bomb, published by our partners in PAX in the Netherlands. And this really gives you a sense of who's investing, how much money is being put into the nuclear weapons complex writ large, and also who's divesting and who's stepping away from it. So that could be another angle or avenue that you might want to look at, particularly for people living and working in a nuclear armed country. Okay, other hands.
Yes, I'm bringing in Robin now. Robin, you're muted.
Oh, great. Okay, thank you. I actually have a couple of questions. One is that we should always be sure to include the word weapons in when we refer to the treaty, because a nuclear ban treaty, they have existed before the comprehensive test ban treaty, for example. So just so we don't get confused that we're just talking about nuclear weapons. The second question is about Kazakhstan that recently ratified the treaty, but they've also offered themselves as a repository for nuclear waste. So nuclear weapons material waste will be crossing the borders. Doesn't that disqualify them from being able to sign the treaty? So that's a question. But my third one is a group here near us in Northampton has initiated a project. They have joined ICANN, and their group is called Nuclear Ban US. Their project is called Treaty Compliance, and I find this a very a fertile area for activity for those of us in the United States. It implies that you can you work with all sorts of different groups, as you say, banks, municipalities, and schools even, to help them understand what it is to be nuclear weapons ban compliant. And then, they sign up, they get a certificate, or they announce it, or they divest their pension funds. So I suggest people go to that website and look at what they have to offer, Nuclear Ban US. But since you haven't mentioned it so far, is WILPF behind this concept?
Thank you, Robin. I will bring in a couple of more voices. I will take the question from Guy. Guy, you're muted. Please come in.
Okay, thank you, Elena, for giving me the floor. It will not be a question, it will rather be maybe an experience sharing about the nuclear ban treaty. And also thank Alison for the great job they have done in reaching critical will in order to bring in the new guide they are presenting today. So the treaty, first we welcome it here in Cameroon with a lot of hope, considering the humanitarian impact of the treaty in worldwide. Though Cameroon is not really exposed to the harms of the nuclear weapons, we as a member of the WILPF community, we feel that obligation to support the work WILPF is doing worldwide in order to improve women's condition, in particular security and peace. So what we actually did in Cameroon when there was a march in New York, we had a robust media campaign in order to support all the initiatives coming from Reaching Critical Will and another organization involved in the fight in order to reach to that treaty. So as we are talking about the guide, I wanted to bring in that what we shall do in our countries in order to bring other states to sign and even ratify the treaty is, for example, to start looking, um, have a mapping in the country to see whether the country has already signed or even ratified. For instance, when I look into Cameroon's situation, I can notice that the country haven't signed. Uh, not, no, Cameroon is no signatory, haven't ratified the treaty. So if we have that information already, what we can do as next step could be to show to our government the humanitarian impact of nuclear ban even in other countries, because one argument we can provide to our government is to let them know that if they sign and ratify the treaty, they can help reducing suffering in other countries, because uh, the treaty needs a number of ratifications before entering into force. So even if you are not having direct impact of nuclear weapons in our country, we can still encourage our government to ratify it in order to help those countries who are deeply affected. So for now, this is what I wanted to bring in the discussions, and maybe we'll come back later. Thank you.
Thank you, Guy. I have two more hands, Alison, or would you like to come in, or should I just continue?
I can respond quickly to that, and then we can do the other two. Guy, thanks so much for sharing your experience and your strategy for Cameroon. I think it's a really good one, and it's been sort of great to see all the different activities that you've done over time, both on the TPNW, but also on the Arms Trade Treaty, in really trying to make the case for the humanitarian impact of all these different kinds of weapons. And it's a good idea, when it's maybe not the highest priority in the national context, but to make the case that in joining this treaty, Cameroon's going to help play a role in reducing suffering in other places. Robin, I know, yeah, Kazakhstan, they've signed it. They haven't ratified it yet. They did that just a couple of weeks ago. And I think I would agree that maybe it's a little bit controversial, and that we should be watchful, of their future actions with receiving the nuclear waste, nuclear materials, and definitely call them out on that, and point to contradictions in their actions. We've seen this sort of in other treaty agreements too. I'm thinking right now actually of Canada, which is where I'm from, which keeps saying that it wants to sign the Arms Trade Treaty, yet keep selling weapons to Saudi Arabia, which are being used in Yemen. So civil society there, and also Ray and I are just kind of keep being vocal critics of this sort of hypocrisy and double standard, and what they aspire to on the international stage, but what they're also doing in national action. So I think that with all the countries that are joining the TPNW, we should be welcoming and we should be excited, but we shouldn't also just accept kind of carte blanche that they're going to immediately fall in line. And I hadn't known about the activities of the local group on treaty compliance, but I think that sounds like a really good initiative. I've been made aware of some initiatives that I think ICANN members in the US are doing to get cities on board as nuclear weapon free zone cities, which I think builds on an earlier initiative through Mayors for Peace, but it's sort of being updated and upgraded and brought back in the context of the ban treaty. All right, are there other hands?
Yes, I have three. I'll bring in Barbara. Barbara.
Yes, just a second. I have two audios going. Thank you very much. Here in the United States, one of the things that we have done is to start an online petition addressed to the President and to our Senate. The President can sign, and the Senate must give consent before our country can ratify. The petition is addressed by us to Americans to tell the President and the Senate that we want this petition to be ratified. And we've been working using social media to try to get the word out, in addition to spreading paper petitions and gathering signatures. So it's been part of a nationwide education process. And we've gotten lots of interest about reading it, not so much about signing it.
Thank you. Thank you for your contribution. I'll now move to Joanne. Joanne.
Yes, after I talked about the Mayors for Peace project, I realized that there were so many other things that are happening in WILPF US, United States. Barb, so I wanted to be sure we got the petition in, and also the things that Robin said, but Barbara covered the petition. The only other thing that I had made a note is that the WILPF United States, Disarm, End Wars Committee has been working our way towards contacting the ICANN member organizations in the United States, which you mentioned also, and planning then to work with them in the within the hopefully near future to work together on educating the public and working from the ground up, as you said, Allison, in the United States. Thank you.
Thank you. I have one last hand for the moment. It's Anne. Oh, well, I have another hand coming up, but Anne, you are muted. Please come in.
I'm Anne. I'm a member of the UK section of WILPF, and I live in Scotland, where the UK nuclear weapons are cited. On April the 7th, coming from an idea of Ray's when she visited the UK in January, where UK WILPF is holding a training day, training women about how to lobby our politicians, which is a skill over the last few years we've lost, and to run an education program about the TPNW. So just to let you know, it's going on in April in London, and if anybody can get to join us from any part, be very welcome. And thanks for the guide. It's going to be so useful for that training day.
Thank you, and thank you so much. We will make sure to put it also on the calendar of our website so people can find more information there as well. I have another hand from Filomena. Filomena, please come in. You're unmuted now. Thank you.
Hello, greetings from Nigeria. In Nigeria, we've had online petitions to the government, because if you've noticed, we've had series of crises in the country from states to states with the local headsmen. And so we've been having trainings for women as well to tag disarm, where we've engaged with the youths and women to see that Nigeria is free from nuclear weapons. We don't engage her, and then we drop arms too. Thank you.
Thank you, Filomena. Alison, I have no more hands for the moment.
Yeah, that's okay. I think this is also great and so exciting, and I kind of feel like with all these actions and activities, it's going to be no time at all before all these countries join the ban. It's been really, I didn't know about most of these actions that I've heard about over the last hour. So thank you for sharing. Please send me information about them, like for example, the training on the 7th afterward. If you have a write up or some photos or anything you want to send, we'd be happy to include them in our e-news. So it's not just, so it depicts sort of more broadly what WILPF is doing on the TPNW. So just to say to everyone that this is great and very exciting, and keep going and keep sharing information. I think if there are no more hands, then maybe it's time to wrap up.
Yes, so if anyone has any last comment or wants to share something, please do raise your hand now, or we can, as Alison is saying, wrap up this webinar.
And just to reiterate, so the resource guide, the book, it's in English, French, and Spanish. It will be going on to My WILPF later today, and then on to the WILPF website and the RCW website possibly tomorrow. So it'll be easy to find quite soon. We'll also send out an email blast from RCW letting everyone know that it's been published. And then over the next 3 to 4 weeks, we'll be rolling out a series of infographics. I'm hoping that one of the infographics will break down what the treaty is about. One of them will focus on the gender dimensions. One of them will focus on the role of women in calling for the treaty. And then I'm not too sure yet what the other ones will do. But we're hoping that these can be useful for you in your work, whether it's for sharing on social media, or if you want to print them and make them into signs for events, that's fine too. But we want to have more than just the book, and also have some other tools that you can use.
Alison, I have one more comment or question from Joanne.
Yep.
Just
Joanne.
want to say thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
And I also have like Robin asking how many we are in this call, how many countries, sorry, we are in this call. So I'm not really sure I can tell for everyone, but I'm thinking that maybe if I can start unmuting you all. So as the last thing before we close, you can say hi to each other, maybe also tell us where you are from. So I'm gonna start unmuting you little by little. It's gonna take a little while. I see we have Australia.
Hi.
And
Barbara.
Norway. We have Steve from Cameroon. We have a lot of US.
Cameroon.
Yeah. Greetings from Chris in Australia also. And thank you.
Sweden as well.
Yes, this is Helena, and I just wanted to know where is the list where we can find our own country's reaction, and greetings from Switzerland to everyone, and thank you.
Hi, this is Maria Butler from WILPF International, calling from Geneva. And thank you so much to everyone, and also look forward to continuing this conversation at Congress in Ghana.
Hi everyone, my name's Dylan. I'm from Canadian Voice of Women for Peace.
So I'm Helen Kay from the Scottish branch of WILPF in Britain. Thanks for the webinar.
Hi, this is Robin from Burlington, Vermont, USA? And when will there be more information on the Congress, speakers or events or whatever? Thank you.
Hello, greetings from Nigeria. This is Philomena.
Okay, thank you everyone. And to answer Robin, we will send out more information about the Congress in April with more details about logistics and also like address them. Please then just look for our email anytime soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this meeting.
Thanks to all of you. This has been really, really a good discussion, and I feel excited and happy to know that there's going to be good use for the guide and the toolkit and a lot more action coming on the horizon.